My son, Jake, had never been the type to call me up and offer invitations for holidays. In fact, for the past 5 years, I had spent Thanksgiving alone in my little apartment, curled up with a bowl of homemade soup, some old sitcoms, and a sense of quiet acceptance. The quiet wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it had become my norm. I had grown used to being by myself, to my routine, to the solitude. It wasn't that Jake and I didn't care for each other. No, it was more complicated than that. Jake had his own life now, his career, his wife, his 2 kids, and somewhere along the way, I had been left on the periphery of his world. The phone calls became fewer, the visits rarer, and as the years passed, we both seemed to drift further apart. It wasn't intentional, but life had a way of pulling people in different directions. He was busy, and I was busy too, in my own quiet way. So when I saw his name flashing on my phone screen, I couldn't help but smile. It had been months since we last spoke in any meaningful way. It wasn't often that Jake called to just check in. We spoke mostly in passing text messages on birthdays, a quick call to remind me to take my medications, a brief "How are you doing?" It was always the same, but this time was different. "Hey, Mom," Jake said, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. I was thinking, would you want to come spend Thanksgiving with us this year? We've got a spare room. You could fly in, celebrate with the grandkids. It's been a while since we've had a real family holiday together. I froze for a moment, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Thanksgiving? With them? It had been years since I was invited to be a part of their family celebrations. In fact, I could hardly remember the last time Jake had even invited me to their home. I had stopped expecting it long ago. "Really? You want me to come?" I asked, almost in disbelief. I couldn't remember the last time Jake had extended an invitation like this. It was almost surreal. "Yeah, Mom, it'll be good. The kids would love to see you. It'll be fun." His words were so casual, but they carried a weight that made my heart skip a beat. Fun, family, togetherness, all the things I had longed for but never asked for. Suddenly, my heart swelled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized how deeply I missed being a part of their lives. "I would love that, Jake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll start packing." The words felt foreign coming from me. Had I really just agreed to fly halfway across the country to spend Thanksgiving with my son? I felt a rush of emotions: excitement, hesitation, and even fear. I hadn't spent an extended period of time with Jake and his family in so long. Would things be awkward? Would I be the intruder, the guest in their lives that no one really wanted? But then, as I hung up the phone, a wave of warmth washed over me. Jake had invited me. He had thought of me, and for once, it felt like he wanted me there. I wasn't just the mother he called when he needed something, or the distant figure in the background of his life. No, this time I was invited to be a part of something real, a family holiday. Together. The days leading up to the trip were filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. I hadn't flown in years, and the thought of navigating airports, security lines, and the general hassle of air travel was overwhelming. But I pushed through, the anticipation of seeing my son and his family outweighing the dread. Packing my suitcase, I found myself overthinking every detail. Should I bring something for dinner? A gift for Emily, my daughter-in-law? Would the kids like the books I bought for them? What should I wear? In my excitement, I felt like a schoolgirl preparing for a big event. As I packed, I thought back to the old days when Jake was just a little boy, the light of my life. I could still remember the way he would curl up next to me on the couch, the feel of his small hands clutching mine as he told me about his day. Those were the years when I felt like I was his whole world. But that felt like a lifetime ago. Now, at 58, I wondered if he even remembered those days, or if, like me, they had been swept away by the years. The flight was long, but I didn't mind. I spent the entire time imagining the reunion, wondering if Jake would be different, if Emily would finally warm up to me again after all those strained visits over the years. I hoped things would be different. Maybe this time, our relationship would finally heal. When I landed in Jake's city, I was greeted by the soft, cool breeze of the autumn air. I stepped into the taxi, my thoughts running wild. The ride from the airport was long, filled with small talk between Jake and me. It didn't take long for me to feel the gap between us again, the uncomfortable silence that had begun to settle in our relationship over the years. His house was located in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a far cry from the busy city where he had grown up. It was a beautiful 2-story home with a well-kept yard and large windows that let in the golden afternoon light. The kind of house that screamed family, with its inviting front porch and colorful flower boxes. I had seen pictures of their home before, but seeing it in person was something entirely different. I wondered if I'd feel at home in it. Was I still a part of their family? Or had the years of distance and silence eroded any bond we had left? When Jake opened the door, his face lit up. "Mum," he exclaimed, pulling me into a warm hug. It had been a while since I had been held like that, and for a brief moment, I felt like I was still his little girl, the one he once looked up to with awe. He ushered me inside, where Emily was waiting. I didn't expect a grand welcome, but Emily was polite. She offered me a tight smile, her eyes glancing quickly to Jake before looking away. The greeting was cordial but distant, and I couldn't help but wonder what had changed between us. After a brief moment, Emily excused herself to the kitchen, and Jake led me to the living room where Lily and Ben, his 2 young children, were playing with toys on the floor. They both jumped up as soon as they saw me, their faces lighting up with excitement. "Grandma!" they yelled, rushing to greet me. I laughed and bent down to hug them both, feeling my heart swell with joy. They were so different from the last time I saw them. Lily was now 6, and Ben had just turned 4. Time had passed, and they had grown so much. It was a bittersweet moment. Jake stood behind me, smiling as he watched me interact with his children. I could see the pride in his eyes, but there was also a sense of distance, something that was difficult to place. He seemed happy to have me there, but there was a tension in the air. It wasn't just me, I could tell. Something was off in the way Emily interacted with me, in the way Jake kept glancing at her. Dinner that night was everything I had expected, warm, delicious, and filling. The kids sat at the table, chattering away, but the conversation between Emily and me was polite but strained. Jake tried his best to keep the atmosphere light, but it was hard to ignore the cold undercurrent that seemed to linger. Emily's smile never quite reached her eyes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't saying. It wasn't just the past. It was more than that. As we ate, I realized just how much had changed. I was no longer the woman who was needed in their lives. Instead, I was a visitor and outsider trying to fit in. As the night wore on, I tried to push aside my discomfort. I was there to enjoy the holiday, to be with my family, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding on a life that no longer fully included me. I couldn't tell if it was me or them, but the distance between us was palpable. After dinner, Jake suggested that we sit in the living room and relax. The kids were already running around, playing with their new toys, and I found myself sitting in an unfamiliar armchair, trying to push away the sense of unease. I wanted so badly to be a part of this. I wanted to feel like I belonged, like I was still important to them. But the cracks were showing, and the more I tried to ignore them, the clearer they became. Something had shifted in the years since I last visited. Something I didn't understand. And I wondered if I would ever find my place in their world again. The following days felt like an unspoken battle between my heart and my mind. I had imagined this trip as a reunion, a chance to reconnect with Jake, his family, and maybe even repair the broken pieces of our relationship. I had come with the hope that time would heal old wounds, that the distance would dissolve, and we'd find a way back to one another. But as the days passed, the reality was far more difficult to confront. Jake, though kind and attentive, seemed to be pulling away. Little by little, every time we sat down for a conversation, he would glance at Emily as if seeking her approval, or perhaps reassurance. It wasn't an obvious thing, but I noticed. His gestures, his half-smiles, even the way he answered my questions, there was a subtle tension that never quite left. It wasn't the casual, comfortable conversation I remembered from when he was younger. It was more guarded, more careful. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to be growing more distant with each passing hour. She was polite, of course, but there was something in her eyes, a coolness I couldn't ignore. I had always tried to get along with her, to make her feel like part of the family, but every interaction with her now felt strained. Her words were measured, too careful. She would smile at me with the same forced politeness, but her eyes were always elsewhere, either looking at her phone or darting over to Jake, as though she couldn't wait to move on from the conversation. It wasn't lost on me. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was a guest in my own son's life. There was no warmth, no sense of being truly welcome. I tried my best to stay out of the way, to not overstep, but it was as if I didn't even know my place anymore. One afternoon, after the kids had gone to bed, Jake invited me to sit outside with him. The air was crisp and cold, and I wrapped my shawl tightly around me as we settled on the porch swing. The evening was peaceful, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the breeze. For a brief moment it felt like old times, just Jake and me, sitting in silence, enjoying each other's company. But the silence quickly turned heavy, filled with unspoken words. I knew Jake well enough to read the tension in his posture. He was hesitant, avoiding my gaze. "Mum," he said finally, his voice low, "there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." I braced myself, my heart skipping a beat. Was this the moment where everything I had feared would finally come to light? Was Jake going to confront me about something I had done wrong? Was he going to tell me that I had overstayed my welcome, that I was no longer needed in his life? "Jake," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady, "if something's bothering you, you can talk to me." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he had as a child. "It's not really bothering me. It's more like, I don't know how to say this. It's just, things have changed a lot since I left home. And I guess I don't know how to balance everything. You, Emily, the kids' work." He trailed off, as if unsure where to continue. I nodded, not quite understanding what he was saying. I thought he had invited me here to reconnect, to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But what he was saying didn't make sense. Was he saying that he didn't want me to be a part of his life anymore? Or was this just another attempt to appease his wife, to placate the growing tension between them and me? "I get it, Jake," I said, my voice quieter now. "I know that life changes. It's not easy to juggle everything. I'm not trying to interfere. I just wanted to spend time with you, with the kids, to be a part of this your life." Jake turned to me, his face softening. "I know, Mom, He stopped, searching for the right words. "I don't know how to explain this. I'm grateful you came, I really am. But things are different now. Emily and we've got our own way of doing things. We've built a life, and it's just hard to fit everyone in, you know? I felt a lump form in my throat. This wasn't the reunion I had imagined. There was no apology for the distance between us, no effort to understand the pain I had quietly carried for years. It was as if Jake had created a life that no longer included me in any real way, except when it was convenient. I tried to smile, but it felt forced, unnatural. I understand, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I just want to be here for you, Jake. I've always been here. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he stared out at the darkening sky, his face shadowed. I know, Mom. I know. You've always been here. But sometimes, it's just hard to figure out where we all fit in. I don't know how to explain it. There it was again, distance. An invisible wall that had come up between us, one that I didn't know how to break. Down. It was as if the years of silence, the absence, had carved a space between us that I could no longer bridge. After a long pause, Jake finally stood up, offering a weak smile. I should probably go check on the kids. I think they're getting out of hand. Anyway, I'm glad you're here, Mum. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him that I loved him. But something told me that it was no longer the time. Maybe it had never been the time dot as Jake disappeared into the house. I sat there for a while longer, my thoughts swirling, in confusion. This wasn't how I had pictured this holiday. I had come here with the hope that things would be different, that we could finally reconnect and heal old wounds. But instead, it felt like I was walking on the edge of a chasm, always trying to reach out, but never quite making it across. I thought about my life, about the years I had spent raising Jake, giving everything I had for him. But somewhere along the way I had lost him. And now, as I sat in the fading light of the evening, I wasn't sure if I could ever find my way back. The next day, Thanksgiving arrived, and it was supposed to be a day of celebration, a day of coming together, of family, of warmth. But instead, I felt like an outsider in my own son's home. It was a beautiful morning, crisp and cool, with sunlight streaming in through the kitchen windows, but inside it felt cold. The house was filled with the sounds of Emily bustling around, preparing a lavish dinner, the children running and playing in the living room. Jake was in and out, checking on things, but we didn't speak much. He seemed preoccupied, lost in the busyness of his own world. I tried to make myself useful, offering to help in the kitchen, but Emily had a way of managing everything without needing my help. She moved quickly, decisively, with a precision that made me feel like I was in her way. She barely acknowledged my presence, offering me tight smiles and quick, polite responses whenever I spoke. She didn't ask for help, and I didn't push. It was like I was invisible. The children, thank goodness, were still too young to understand the tension, running around and playing with their toys. I tried to engage with them, to distract myself from the knot of anxiety forming in my chest. But no matter how much I tried to smile and make them laugh, something felt wrong. I wasn't truly here. I wasn't really with them. I was an observer in the middle of my own family's life, a silent witness to their quiet distance by the time dinner rolled around. My nerves were raw. We sat down at the dining table, the feast laid out in front of us: turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, everything you could imagine for a traditional Thanksgiving meal. The atmosphere, however, was anything but warm. Everyone had their plate filled, but no one was talking much. There was the occasional clink of silverware, but the silence was so thick I could almost touch it. Jake looked up at me, his eyes tired. "I'm glad you're here, Mom," he said quietly, his voice sincere but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I nodded, forcing a smile, but the words seemed hollow, coming from both of us. I could see the weariness in his eyes. The exhaustion from trying to manage everything, to keep everyone happy, when he didn't know how. Emily, sensing the tension, shifted in her seat, her gaze flickering between Jake and me. I couldn't help but notice how quickly she masked the discomfort that was rising in the room, flashing a smile and trying to make small talk. "This turkey turned out really well," she said, offering a bright but forced smile. "How about you, Sophia? What's your secret for making Thanksgiving special?" I paused, staring at my plate for a moment, unsure of how to respond. It was such a simple question, yet I knew there was a deeper meaning behind it, an unspoken question of where I fit into this family now, what my role was. I had spent decades making holidays special for Jake, making everything just right. But now all I felt was a sense of alienation, as if I had no place at the table anymore. I smiled tightly. "I guess, for me, it's about being together," I said. "It's about family, no matter what. Even when things aren't perfect." I glanced at Jake, hoping to catch his eye, to convey the depth of what I was feeling. Jake nodded, but his gaze quickly shifted away. I saw it, he was uncomfortable. I knew that I had crossed some invisible line, but I couldn't stop myself from speaking, from reaching out. The rest of the meal passed in silence, save for the clinking of silverware and the occasional murmur of approval over the food. I ate slowly, lost in my own thoughts, the sound of my family around me seeming so distant, so disconnected. It was supposed to be a celebration, but all I could feel was the weight of unspoken words and broken bonds. After dinner, the children went off to bed, their laughter filling the air for a brief moment before it too faded. Emily and Jake started cleaning up, and I felt the familiar sting of being in the way once again. I tried to help, but Emily waved me off. "No need," she said. "I've got it." So I retreated to the living room, sitting in the quiet, surrounded by the remnants of a meal I could barely stomach. I could hear Emily and Jake in the kitchen, their voices low but tense. There was something in the way they spoke to each other, something that made it clear they had their own private struggles, their own frustrations. And I couldn't help but feel like I was part of it, the invisible elephant in the room, the reason for their discomfort. Later that night, as the house finally settled into silence, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring out the window at the moon. It felt so surreal, so painfully empty. I had hoped that coming here would be the start of something new, a chance to rebuild our relationship. But instead, it had been an exercise in quiet desperation. And then, just as I was about to give in to the loneliness, the door to the living room opened. Jake stepped in, his face soft with uncertainty. He hesitated for a moment, and then, without a word, he sat down beside me. The silence between us was thick, but this time, it wasn't filled with tension. It was simply the quiet before a breakthrough. "No, things haven't been easy," Jake said finally, his voice low but steady. "I've been trying, Mom. I really have. But there's been so much going on, and I've been so wrapped up in everything. In us, Emily, the kids, work. I didn't realize how much I was pushing you away." I turned to look at him, my heart swelling with a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and something deeper, something I couldn't quite identify. Jake was opening up, something he hadn't done in years. I wanted to reach out, to tell him that I understood, that I had always understood. But the words got caught in my throat. "I'm sorry, Mom," he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "I should have been more present. I should have seen what was happening with you, with us. I guess I just thought that if I kept going, kept moving forward, everything would work itself out. But it hasn't, and I see now how much I've hurt you." I felt tears welling in my eyes, though I tried to blink them away. I had waited so long to hear these words, but I didn't know how to respond. How could I explain the pain, the years of feeling forgotten, ignored, and insignificant in my own son's life? But as I sat there, listening to Jake's raw admission, something shifted inside me. "It's not just you, Jake," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I've been lost too. I thought that if I just kept giving, kept doing, you'd see me. But maybe I should have asked for more. Maybe I should have told you what I needed, what I've been missing." Jake looked at me, his eyes full of guilt and something else, genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Mom. I've been so caught up in everything. I never meant to make you feel like this. I've been so selfish." I shook my head, smiling through the tears. "We've both been selfish. We've both been so busy with our own lives that we've forgotten to really see each other." For the first time in what felt like forever, we sat in silence, just letting the words linger in the air between us. There was so much to say, so many feelings to unpack. But in that moment there was a quiet understanding between us, a mutual realization that we had both been wrong, but we still had time to make it right. "I love you, Jake," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I love you too, Mom," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. And just like that, in the quiet of the night, we began the long process of healing. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more moments of awkwardness, and more pain to work through. But in that moment, I knew that we were finally on the right path. Maybe not the one I had imagined when I first arrived, but the one that would lead us to where we needed to be. The Thanksgiving weekend ended, and I returned home with a heavy heart but a hopeful spirit. I had my son back, not in the way I had hoped for, but in a way that mattered more than anything else. It was a start, and that was enough for me, Dot. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had come home.